mood, if you like, of not taking things seriously enough, whether you're Wanda's neighbour or whether you're the lawyer that Peter referred to. That thing of it not being taken seriously enough underpins a lot of the conversations that we have, I think. Phone lines are open. To remind you of the specific question we're asking. It's, could this life have been saved? Could Sara Sharif's life have been saved? That involves a more systemic approach, perhaps, than we've taken thus far, to things that would be better, or things you know about the system that make you confident that you know how it happened or how perhaps it could have been prevented. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Peg's in Leeds. Peg, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, just following two amazing calls there, James. But I think there's a theme coming through here. And for me, it is about the short-sightedness and the short-termism of a lot of these solutions. So I used to work for a government agency that was set up after the Victoria Climbié disaster, and the inquiry into that was part of the Children's Act. And with Victoria Climbié, I don't even remember, but about 12 different occasions, they discovered professionals could have stepped in and saved her.
Yes.
And what the problem was that they didn't talk to each other. So police weren't talking to social workers, weren't talking to education, weren't talking to nurses, all of that. So this agency was set up to make sure the children's workforce, across the workforce, was joined up.
So it's 12 different nets that she's fallen through. It's not one big one.
No, it was 12 different. So this agency was set up in part to make sure that couldn't happen again. This agency was at the heart of creating multi-agency working for vulnerable children. The team I was in, we were setting the systems and policy and strategy for how that would happen at every local authority level across the country. We created a framework which was created by professionals who understood that it was all about what needed to happen. There were specific standards for individual professions that were set up. There was a new profession called an early years professional that was created, which was a new profession of dedicated expert people working in early years. And all of this was got rid of by the coalition government.
I checked again.
Bonfire the Quangos.
2012. It was the Children's Workforce Development Council. You go to the government page and here are the dread words. Children's Workforce Development Council has closed. If you can, and I don't mean this in any way rudely, but if I were to insist on absolutely forensic objectivity, what reason would they give, in your view, for closing it down?
Do you know what? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that some of the things I worked on, particularly this framework, when the government changed, things about that framework had to change because they were said they were too associated with the previous government. The early years professional was moved and it was replaced with a teaching-based qualification. So that was a kind of ideological shift. It isn't about early years, it's about education.
Ideological it's the first time that word has appeared, and I don't want to make it party political, although it's hard not to when we learn about the Jay's organised that other thing Jay was involved in, and the thing you were involved in. The contact centres being axed in 2010. Sure Start would have played a role in all of this. So that setup I did about the two extremities here, one being you're never going to be able to protect all of them, but the other being we can definitely do more to protect some of them. If you're doing cost-benefit ratios, you're going to struggle to make a very powerful case for spending the sort of money that needs to be spent to save lives like Victoria Climbié's or Sara Sharif's. Or Peter Connolly's.
But doesn't that come down to the fact that a cost-benefit ratio is just so totally the wrong thing to talk about when you talk about children's lives?
But when you said ideology, that's the first thing that popped into my mind.
Right, okay, yeah. I mean, one of the things that this has left me with, and I've done loads of work over the years in kind of thinking about legislation and how you set up public services and all of that. And one of the things that this genuinely has left me with is a belief that we can't leave children's safety to the parliamentary and political cycle. So I think every serious case review since has said that a body like CWDC needs to be set up, right?
And here we still are.
They keep saying it. And it keeps being said, if there is another one set up, and I hope to God there is, I want it set up under law so that it can't then go, and a government changes, they say, right, we're going to get rid of this again. Because I'm not kidding, the number of people in that agency who we worked so hard there because we knew We knew everything we were doing was hopefully going to save lives. And, you know, years later, I was giving a talk on something, and this bloke came up to speak to me. He said his dad had been working in children's services, and his dad had brought home this framework that I'd overseen to say this rainbow, because it was a rainbow, is saving children's lives. You know, there were things that were working. They were working. They were new. They were starting to work, and it was just scrapped. And I just think we can't leave it to politicians to make those decisions, because we're talking about, I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but
I know you are.
About little kids' lives.
I know you are. And to feel that you were making progress and then to have politicians come in and undo it must be, I mean, almost unbearable.
And then each time it said, we need this again. And the thing that I find, not just the waste of money, because obviously, you know, millions of pounds were spent on this, and then of course that goes, and that's wrong. But also the level of expertise and experience that was in that organisation. It was the best people in the country.
That's why I asked you. That's why I said objectively, what reason would they give? And all we can really come up with is that either they didn't like the fact that it was too closely associated with the previous administrations, the Labour administrations that had introduced it in both cases, or it was too expensive. And then there's that line with the contact points about sort of liberty, about too much surveillance, that school of thought, which has a lot of traction, and I have some sympathy with it. They're doing too much Kafkaesque checking up and stuff like that. But if you're asking the question, how do you save a life like Sara Sharif's, the answer is going to include you do more checking and you react more to the things that you find when you're checking.
I mean, I know there was issues and concerns about the whole data thing when I was working
that's
there.
what it was, wasn't it? Is keeping
and I
data.
understand those.
Yeah.
I understand that, you know, and I also understand people who are concerned about things getting too extreme and too strict, and you know, and when you talked about a few of those things this morning. So and we were really cognizant of that when we were working on these things. But the idea of co-locating teams. I mean, one of the things I'll never forget, this rainbow, the outer thing that we worked out, that one of the most common things that you needed to make sure kids didn't fall through was a common language between professionals, because different professionals understood different things by different words.
Different jargon.
So different jargon. So if, for example, if a social worker talks about supervision, that means something really different to a police officer.
Or a teacher.
To a teacher.
Yeah, I've never thought of that before. So you're absolutely right.
The outside thing was we need to create a common language that's used across the children's workforce. And then there was money, and there were systems in place for supporting every local area through what they then had was children's trust.
And they've undone it. I'm absurdly late for the next break, Liz. But Peg, I beg your pardon.
That's all right.
I feel that you could carry on talking until Sheila Fogarty gets here, and I know you could, and I wish I could listen, but I'd like to ask, what do you do now? Are you still in this sort of job? No,
I work as a journalist now, actually.
Gosh. So, we can make a difference sometimes, but to make a difference more meaningfully and then have it dismantled by politicians must be... Keep in touch, won't you?
Yeah, we'll do. Let's put it back on the statutory footing.
That's
safety.
A statutory footing.
Too important for political change.
Yes. And whose brief would it be under? The Education Secretary's?
Well, it depends. I mean, if it's the Education Department, it's a bit different. It was at one point the Department of Children, Schools and Families. So I think a big question is where does it sit, and where is children's welfare and safety, not just
whose
education.
Responsibility should it be? Well, Bridget Phillipson's moved today on some of the issues thrown up by this case, but I'm haunted by that first message from Daniel about the fact that for the perfectly good reasons, people do things in the immediate aftermath of cases like this that in the long run don't necessarily turn out to be beneficial. The Ed Balls case with Sharon Shoesmith being a case in point. Peg, thank you so much. Gosh, calls today are off the charts, right? 10:52 is the time.
Weekdays.